Hello, and welcome to another live screencast with me, Queen Raae. I'm here to help you get the most out of Gatsby. Today, we're going to be looking at SSG with Gatsby, of course. I'm going to be looking at 3 ways of creating statically. Statically. Suddenly, I can't speak. SSG static site generation. It's here on my cheat sheet. Anyway, if you are if you're watching this in the replay, I would suggest checking out the description for timestamps to the different sections of this live screencast, since I do not edit this after the fact. I can also recommend pushing up the speed to about 1.5, because again, I'm not cutting away all those kind of ums and ahs, so it could be good to speed it up a little bit. So as I said, we're looking at static site generation. I am having a trouble with all these acronyms, but when I have it in front of me, I can do it. So static site generation, or SSG, which is the acronym, is a way to create pages or routes that are already all the HTML is generated at the build time, at Gatsby build time. So when you go to that route in your browser, the HTML is already there. It doesn't need any JavaScript to work. And this is different from what we might have been used to if you were creating React apps, because then there will always be that kind of little bit of a spinner that comes up where you have to wait until the JavaScript starts kicking in. But with Gatsby, one of the really nice things, or the kind of the foundation of Gatsby, is that the site is statically generated, which means when you're building the site, all of the pages are built out fully, all the DOM and everything. Let's have a look at what I mean. So here's kind of the example site that we're going to be looking at, and I've sourced some videos, and I'm going to show these. And as you can see, the page came up, and just like we expect. But let's see what happens if we disable JavaScript. Disable JavaScript. So in a React app, a regular React app situation, if we hit refresh on this page, we would have seen a little bit of a spinner before the page shows up. But with this static generation, all of the HTML elements and the full DOM is here on the load. And we can have another look at, let's have a look at a video page. And you can see, again, there was a page load because Gatsby has created a statically generated version of this page or this route. And we can see all of the DOM, but as you can see, we can't, like the iframe for the YouTube embed is not working because that requires JavaScript, but the iframe is there and all of our other content is there. And if we enable JavaScript again, enable JavaScript, and we head on back and forth. Oh, I'm going to need to do a refresh here. A refresh here with the JavaScript enable. If we click the link, you can see it's a little bit of a faster transition. It's not a full page load, because after that initial load, well, something is not working now, but after this initial load, the site is rehydrated, and that means that it goes from being that static generated HTML DOM, and the JavaScript kicks in and it makes it into one of these single page applications in the way that we are used to from Create, React app, and so forth. So let's have a look at how we can do that. So as I mentioned, we're going to be looking at 3 ways. We can create and export components inside of React components inside of the pages folder in source. We can use the file system route API also inside of the source pages folder, or we can kind of manually create pages inside of our Gatsby node file. So let's start with the first one. Here inside of pages, I've created an index file. And as you can see, with all kinds of content in there, And that's the front page here that we're seeing. So for every page inside of the pages folder, Gatsby creates a statically generated route for you. The next version is, and the important thing here is that you need to export the component as default, because it's the default export that kind of becomes the page, and you're not allowed to export anything else from this, or you're not allowed to export other components and other functions, except for one that we're going to be looking at later, from this page. Okay, so that is the first one. The second one is to create, or is to use something called the file system API, and it has kind of a funny looking way of creating it. We have these curly brackets, which means instead of this being kind of one page, we're going to create one page per YouTube node, and we're going to use the ID as the path. So if we head on over to our example, that would be for each of these videos. If I click it, we're going to get that path, and it's going to use the YouTube system, use the component inside of here. And then the third way is to source, or is to query for whatever nodes you want or whatever data you want inside of create pages. And then for each of the results, or it could just be a one-off, you can create pages using the create page functions that we can get from the Gatsby actions. So here I am querying for all of the YouTube nodes that I've already sourced. And I want to use the component that you can find on templates, YouTube template file here, which is kind of identical to our file system API page. And then I say for each of them, I want the path to be the node ID. I want to use the component that we fetched here. And then this, interestingly, we are giving it some kind of context, which it can use to know something about itself. Like this page needs this information. So if this is all we have, you can see here, I'm going to just create like a dummy page here. The same thing with the YouTube templates. If we head on over to our 404 page, we can see all of the pages that have been created. So as you can see, it's been created three pages, or three pages here, or routes here, and kind of the same ones here. These are the ones that are created with my create pages inside of Gatsby node, and the bottom ones here are the ones created with the file system API. And the way I know this is that these look a little bit different with little dashes in between. And that is because the file system route API uses a package called slugify, slugify, which takes whatever kind of comes here. If it goes to look at the YouTube node and it it uses the ID here, it's going to run that ID through Sindresøra's slugify, which does things to make sure that this is a valid path, for a valid URL, that it would become a valid URL. Well, when we created ourselves using the create pages, we have to make sure that our path is valid. So it would be the file system route API would be the same as us running the slugify function over this node ID. And if we click on each of these, we'll see here page created by create page. So that would be the YouTube template that we have. And if we click on the ones down here, we say page created by file system route API. And then we have the index page that we created just with exporting a React component from a JavaScript file inside of pages. So now we created all these pages, but they're not that interesting on their own. We could just keep on creating, like index pages we could write here inside of JavaScript or inside of React components, but that is usually not what we want. Like we've done here, we want to generate a page per each YouTube node. The same thing we're doing with our create pages. We're creating a page per YouTube node. So we then want to kind of source the data into this page. And I kind of skimmed over it, but with Gatsby, we source data into a data layer that you can explore here in the Graphical Explorer. And that is what the file system API kind of does. Let's see. It goes through, all YouTube. It kind of does this query, and then it runs through all of them and creates a page per ID. Exactly the same that we are doing in our Gatsby node here, where we are querying for all the YouTube's videos and then creating a page for each one. So how will we get the data into our pages? Well, we do that by running a GraphQL query. And that is when we need, let's start with the YouTube template. So here we know we've given it an ID. Here we say that the context has an ID and we want to use that ID. And we can do that by creating, as I said, a graphical query to fetch that ID. I often start by using the Explorer, and as you can see here, YouTube. And then we have the ID, and what more information do we want for the front page, maybe, or for this specific page? We want the title for the heading, and then we would like the HTML that is added to this node, which gives us that embed iframe. And then you have this a code exporter where you can export your code. Unfortunately, it's a little weird when you need to find one, because what we want is that we want to find the one on the ID, and we want to use the ID coming in from that page context. We want to grab that ID. We want to send it into our query. So it's kind of similar to this one, but you have to wrap it around in kind of another layer of query that grabs it. Let's have a look. Let's head on over to our template. We export, so that's the only other thing that you can export from a template or a file system route API page, or another React component page that you have inside of Pages, is a query. So we can see that this is very similar to what is here in the page query. We could export. It's looking for a YouTube of ID, where ID equals something. And that is what we are getting in here. We're kind of like grabbing it from the from that page, what's it called? The page context. But now I'm thinking I'm on the wrong example. Let's have a look in our template, because in our template, yeah, we still get, so the ID is what we are getting in here. So we're running this query, and the results of the query is what we will get as a data prop in our component. And then we can destruct from that data prop the things we have asked for. We asked for the HTML, the title, and the URL. So let's get the title and the HTML and the URL. So we'll get that from the data. Let's show the title. And then we'll add some nice HTML here to show the HTML we're getting. But let's have a look at the title first. So it would be the ones that we are creating ourselves. It would be one of these. A create page by create page, and it's not working. Let's see what's up. Maybe we are getting some That should be working. It's assigned a value. It's defined but never used. Let's see if we can figure out what's up. So let's try to console log the data coming in here. We have YouTube. Oh, sorry. I always forget this. So now you see you have to do data and then YouTube because there could be several queries here. So we need to name the query that, or the results that we actually want, which is the YouTube results. And now let's save and it should work. There we go. We have the title. And then we can grab some more ready-made code here to display the rest of our HTML, or the rest of our. I cannot speak today. I don't know what's up. And there we have it. We have the YouTube embed, and we also have a link to YouTube. And now we can, for the YouTube or for the Gatsby file system API version, we can actually do the exact same thing. So let's just grab everything, head on over to our YouTube file system API and rename that YouTube file system API again. YouTube file system API page. And we should now have beautiful pages made for our file system API version. Yes, we do. And then I wanted to show you another interesting thing is that even though this is a page that you've kind of created manually, if you've written all the content in here manually, you can still do a graph, you can still do a query to the data, like Gatsby data layer, and show that data on this page. So for this one, I want to do kind of similar as we do when we create all these pages. We'll ask for all of the YouTube videos, so that, and the thumbnail, so that we can kind of have like a little bit of a menu, and we need the ID to create links. And we don't need that weirdness anymore. So let's do all YouTube, ID, title, and thumbnail URL. And as you can see, we get all of the results. And now we could actually grab this, because for these types of queries, it totally works. So let's grab it from there. We have the query. We will then have data accessible to us. And again, we will need to ask for data all YouTube. And then as we can see in the results, it's data all YouTube nodes to get this list. And then I have some ready-made goodness. We'll do section. Showcase all of them. We'll do data. And then we'll return. We'll return and do an article for each one. And then we need a link to, and then we'll do an image. And there we need the node, thumbnail, URL. And then as the alt text, we can do the title of the video. Let's have a look and see if we get all of them. Oh, there's another error. Link to, oh, it must be a not assigned something. So let's say we now want to link to the node ID. And then, as I always forget, since it's React and it's a repeated list, we need to use the ID here as a code for the article. And there you have it. We have all the videos, and we also have a link. And as you can see, page is created by the create page, because this is the node ID kind of raw that we get from YouTube. And that is the same thing we use when we create our when we use the create page action. We use the node ID, the raw node ID for the YouTube. While, as I said, with YouTube or with Gatsby file system API, it uses the slugify, Sindre Sørhus slugify under the hood. So if we instead for using the node ID as a directly, we could do slugify from Sindre Sørhus package and save. Now we should have links. Oh, it should have been created by, we have, I copy pasted over it, page created by file system route API. Oh, there it goes, page created by file system route API. So that's a little bit of a key difference between the file system route API and the create pages. When you use the file system route API, it will do things to that value to make sure that it is a valid, URL value. While when you do it yourself in the inside of create pages using the create page action, you are responsible for creating a path that makes sense. And as you can see, then we have to, for our little menu here, do we want to use the file system route API pages? Then we have to slugify that node ID. Or do we want to use the create page version? Then we can use the node ID directly. What are these errors? Oh, div cannot appear as a descendant of P. Oh, it's because there's a div inside of this iframe. What did I do? What did I do? Well, we're not going to look into that right now. Oh, there is Anessa. Somebody is in the chat. Hello. I am kind of wrapping up. So let's get back to it. In today's video, we have live screencast. I don't know why this server isn't working. There we go. In today's live video, we have looked. Oh, I think I know why. What does it actually link to? It doesn't link to anything because of JavaScript. Well, it does. There it goes. Okay. It's just a little bit of weirdness when I'm serving. Anyway, back to the summary. Today, we have looked at 3 ways to create statically generated routes with Gatsby. You can do them by creating files that export React components inside of the source pages folder. You could use the file system route API that will kind of reach into the data layer and generate a page per node that you ask it to. Or you can manually create pages inside of the Gatsby node, using create pages and the create page action. And there you are free to kind of make up pages nilly-willy, but usually you will do a query to the Gatsby data layer and then create pages based on the results. And what is good with static site generation is that even though we disable JavaScript, the page still works because all of these pages are created on build time. So all of the kind of HTML is created on build time and is ready to be served on the initial page load. And after the initial page load, something happens called rehydration, where JavaScript kicks in and kind of takes over the page and makes it into single page application in the same way that we are accustomed to with Create, with regular React applications that you might have made with Create React app. So if we disable JavaScript and refresh, we can, oh, it went away. I think I need to have the DevTools open for it to work. Disable JavaScript. And then let's refresh. So we see all of the content is still there. If we head on over to one of these pages, we can definitely see that JavaScript is disabled because our YouTube embed doesn't work anymore, but all of the HTML is here. So that's it. You can also head on over to, if you check out the link, there will be a link to the GitHub repository for this code. You can also sign up for my newsletter where I talk about all things Gatsby almost every day. And then I'll see you hopefully in the next one. Bye-bye.